Good day, everyone. I am Rochelan P. Alido, a second-year student of Negros Oriental State University, Shatan Campus, taking up Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in English. So for today's video, we will discuss the lesson about motivation. So teaching learning process is important in the academic achievement of students in a particular field of study. Furthermore, principles, methods, and strategies are also important in the realization of the teaching-learning process. It helps the students to learn effectively, meaningfully, and efficiently with respect to the lesson's objectives, which are relevant to cognitive, psychomotor, and affective learning domains of the learners. Meanwhile, the use of the appropriate instructional materials is vital to the total development and personality of the learners. Thus, learners will become motivated in their classroom activities. Moreover, teaching learning process in modern era is improving and has one of the vital considerations in promoting and fostering learning processes. In other words, students are exposed and engaged to the different activities in order to gain experiences which are important in full development of their potentials and competencies. For John Dewey once said, "Education is a continuous process." On the other hand, we are always learning because of the activities that we are involved and engaged. We learned something for ourselves to help improve our way of life. So my task for today is to discuss the definition or the meaning of motivation. But before that, these are the following objectives that will guide our discussion today. For knowledge, we will explain what is motivation. For skills, we will construct the importance and role of motivation in teaching processes. And for effective, we will practice motivation in a classroom environment. So in this part 4, focus on the classroom processes, we will tackle the following specific modules under Unit 4.1. In Module 19, we will tackle meaning and types of motivation. Module 20, theories on factors affecting motivation. And Module 21, students' diversity in motivation. Prior to our discussion, we will discuss first definition of terms. So the first word that we will encounter throughout this discussion is the word motivation. So motivation is an inner drive that causes you to do something and persevere at something. So the second word is intrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation is a motivation to engage in an activity for its own sake. And the third word is extrinsic motivation, which is a motivation to engage in an activity as means to an end. So, what is the definition of motivation? So, motivation is an inner drive that causes you to do something and persevere at something. On the other hand, ability refers to what the children can do. So, definitely motivation refers to what this child or these children will do. So motivation refers to the initiation, direction, intensity, and persistence of a behavior of an individual. And motivation is described as a state that energizes, directs, and sustains behavior. Motivation involves goals and requires activity. So goals provide the impetus or the urge or the boost for the direction of action, while action entails effort, persistence in order to sustain an activity for a long period of time. Now let's move on to the types of motivation. So we have two, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation is described as, or it is intrinsic when the source of motivation is from within the person himself or herself, or the activity itself. It is motivation to engage in an activity for its own sake. And for the second one is extrinsic motivation. A motivation is intrinsic when that which motivates a person is someone or something outside him or her. Extrinsic motivation is motivation to engage in activity as a means to an end. So I will not discuss this topic will be furtherly discussed by the preceding reporters, which is next to this topic. Now let's move forward to the several effects of motivations in students' learning and behavior. So this is from the importance of motivation in an education environment. So the first one, motivation directs behavior toward particular goals. Motivation determines the specific goals towards which people strive. Thus, it affects the choices students make. So for example, whether to enroll in an art class or physics, whether to attend a school basketball game during the week or complete an assignment that will due the next day. The second one is motivation also leads to increased effort and energy. Motivation determines whether a student will pursue a task, even a difficult one, with enthusiasm or lackluster attitude. The third one is motivation increases the initiation and persistence of activities. So our example before, like Eric continued with art type activities in his free time. He also tried to perform these types of activities in relation to his other assignments. So motivation will increase students' time on task and is also an important factor affecting their learning and their achievement. The next one is motivation enhances cognitive processing. Motivation actually affects what and how information is processed because motivated students are more likely to pay attention and try to understand the material instead of simply going through the motions of learning in a superficial manner. And lastly, motivation determines what consequences are reinforcing and punishing. So for example, students with high level of motivation for classroom achievement and high GPAs are reinforced by receiving a grade of A, and they feel punished if they receive or they will receive a grade of F. Now let's move forward to the roles of motivation for learners or for teachers. So motivating the learner to learn is pertinent to curriculum implementation. This is because motivation is an influential factor in the teaching learning situations. The success of learning depends on whether or not the learners are motivated. Motivation drives learners in reaching learning goals. It is important to recognize the fact that motivating learning is a central element of good teaching. So this motivation is advantage or giving motivation to students is an indicator of good teaching towards the student. This implies that learners' motivation is probably the single most important element of learning. Learning is inherently hard work. It is pushing the brain to its limits and thus can only happen with motivation. So students' motivation to learn is of special importance because students' mere presence in the class is of course not a guarantee that students want to learn. It is only a sign that students live in a society where children are required to attend school. Highly motivated learners are likely to learn readily and make any class fun to teach, while unmotivated learners are likely to learn very little and generally make teaching painful and frustrating. Since modern education is compulsory, teachers cannot take learners' motivation for granted. They have a responsibility to ensure learners are motivated to learn. Teachers must persuade learners to want to do and what they ought to do. So according to the study of Chris and Teresa Uliman, motivation is not only important in its own right, it is also an important predictor of learning and achievement. Students who are more motivated to learn persist longer, produce higher quality effort, learn more deeply, and perform better in classes and on standardized tests. So what will teachers do, or what can teachers do towards their students? So teachers can then help students make connections between these important aspects of their lives and the material they are learning. So students who need more help can read quotes from other students about how school was relevant to their lives. By helping students discover the value in learning for their own lives rather than imposing teachers' own interest and goals on students, educators can boost student engagement, persistence, and attainment. So that's all for my discussion today. But if you want to learn further or learn more about motivation, you can visit this research, or you can read this research article entitled Motivation in Learning, Asian Journal of Education and Social Studies. So there are a lot of informations there, such as the importance of motivation towards the learners or the students, the implications of motivation, and more information about motivation. For questions, clarifications, and reactions, you can comment on this video, or you can visit my social media accounts and send me a message. So that's all, everyone. Thank you for listening and enjoy learning. Bye!